Hi everyone, I'm gonna probably be talking quite fast. Sorry for that. This topic is much longer than this talk, and I'm probably will not get into so many details that you would be interested in. So if you would have any questions afterwards, then please find me in the room somewhere around pizza. But yeah, let's start. So I'm going to talk about how you can manage microservices and complex domains using event storming as a tool. So we can find ourselves in different positions when we are talking about new domains or existing domains. We either are just starting the project and we are trying to understand what is this all about and try to share the knowledge, try to find our footing, or we can be in a place where we can have already existing architecture that have been serving us for years even, but as the time grew, we started gaining new functionalities, we started getting new responsibilities, the domain just started bloating, and suddenly the architecture that once was just perfect doesn't fit us anymore, and we want to stop and try to redo it. So how can we do it? I will argue that the event storming is one of the best tools to do that. Of course, there are others, but this is what we did in Ocado, what we used in Ocado, and we use it with quite some success. So the event storming as such was invented or popularized by Alberto Brandolini. It was first appeared around 2013 on one of his blog posts, and it started getting traction. You can find multiple YouTube videos about it. You can find it in some presentations or some trainings on the internet. So it's a tool for understanding complex domains in quite a simple way. You do not actually have to understand event storming. The only person that needs to understand what's happening is the facilitator. All the participants just learn as it goes. It's an interactive session, so everybody participates. And usually it's presented as a tool to be used at the very beginning of the project. However, I will try to argue during this talk that it's also great when you have an already existing project and you want to review the architecture that you have. So, how does it work? Firstly, I would like to start with answering the question why we are talking about event storming. So why events are such a good tool to do that? And the reason would be that events are a natural representation of what's happening in the business. Those are, they can be treated as a ubiquitous language that you can use between the domain experts, the business people, the customers, and the developers, because everybody understands what they mean. Everything that happens in a business can be represented as a business event. And everything that happens due to a business event will trigger another business event and another business event. So you can think of your business as a series of occurrences of things that happen. To give an example, a customer came to our web shop. So customer comes, we show them the basket, we show them the available goods. Customer checks out, we price them, we take money out of their accounts. And using a series of events, you can basically describe any type of complex behavior from the business perspective, using a language that doesn't use any technical knowledge, that doesn't require from you to understand aggregates, understanding databases. You're just talking on a business level. And also promote an asynchronous look at the system from the very beginning. As we know, thinking about, or rather, promoting asynchronous behavior from business is sometimes quite tricky. With from the very beginning, making them think in an asynchronous manner about the project makes it quite easy to adopt asynchronous behavior later down the road. Of course, you do not have to use it, but it's a good benefit. So what do you need to even start the event storming? Firstly, you need to gather appropriate people. And by appropriate people, I mean business domain experts. Business domain experts are people who can answer complex questions about your domain. There are people who know the inner workings of the business you are talking about, and they do not really have to be business people. So in some places you can find that the domain expert is some business analyst somewhere that knows the insides out of your business. In some other places it's an experienced developer that has been with the company for the last 10 years and they just know everything. In other cases it's just the team that develops the tool for the last for some time, and they are the best experts of what it's actually doing. So what in together, what you need is actually somebody who can answer the questions, who can understands the domain and can explain it to the others. But you also need the developers, and I use this term quite broadly. So by developers, I mean the people who are going to develop the solution. The programmers, but also testers, your UX experts, your people from the team leaders, the product owners, everybody who are actually going to be taking part in the developing of the solution. And lastly, you need a facilitator. And facilitator can be, well, it's best if it's somebody who actually knows how event storming works and they have some experience. However, it's not always that easy to find them. So if you're in a fortunate situation that you do not have any facilitator at hand, you can either find a person who was a participant in the session before, so they know more or less how it works like, and they can just fill in the gaps with YouTube presentations and some resources you can find on the web. Or in the worst case scenario, you can just try to learn yourself and facilitate the session on your own. This is actually how I started like 8 years ago, and this is very tricky at the very beginning, but it's totally feasible to do that. As I said, event storming is quite intuitive once you start. Secondly, you need to gather resources. So what you need is basically an unlimited workspace, so a wall or a whiteboard. If you have a wall but you are worried that people will start writing on the wall and they will damage it, you can use an electrostatic foil that you can stick on the wall, and then after the session is complete you can take it off, fold the results of your work, or just take the foil and move it to the open space or to where your team is sitting. Stick it on the wall there, and everybody will see the results of your workings on the wall every day. You can work on it there. Also, what you will require is actually something to put on this wall or unlimited workspace. You need pen or Sharpies. I would argue that Sharpies are better because they are easily readable for a further distance, and sticky notes. And you should have them for every single participant. We want everyone to participate in the meeting, so we would like not to get the shortage of the stickies nor Sharpies. I would argue that you need at least 4 colors for the session. Once we get into the details, you can see that we need even more if you want to get like an end-to-end everything event storming can provide to you session. However, we may end up with we can have a successful session even with 4 colors, so please use those. At least as many. And lastly, you need a location. So location is basically any place that you can use that you will not be interrupted and you will not interrupt others. Okay, so let's get into the meat of things. So how does it work? Firstly, everybody, and by that I mean really everyone, is starting any event that comes to their mind when they are thinking about their domain. And even the beginners, even new joiners, developers that just started, everyone is writing whatever comes to their mind. They just stick it on the wall, do not care about what others have written, do not care about duplication. We write events and stick them on the wall. And we should use proper events. So we should use, as you know, events are things that happened in the past. So you should use past tense. So item committed, task closed, item sold, things that have happened. Once you have everything on the wall, people stopped writing new cards or they slowed down, you can move into a section of organizing those events in the timeline. So when you have the timeline, you can see that not everything is in a single line. it's very rare. I never have found a single domain in which every single event is just in a line one after another. You usually have different occurrences. So you have sections that are just really close to each other. They are talking about the same aspects. They are about some configurations. They are about user flows. They are about some background system tasks, but they are clumping together, not connected to each other. They can happen in parallel, they can happen one after another, but they are just separate wholes. And you can also see that after a specific event you can have two separate different events spawning out of it. So okay, user have checked out, we have a separate flow for, okay, user have money on their account, or user doesn't have enough money on their account. We have a separate flow for that. So you can try to use different tools to figure out if there is something missing here. Possibly we have gaps in our events. Fill them in. You can use reading the stories from left to right, from right to left. You can find missing items in duplicates. Duplicates can be meaningful. So you can find that two cards look exactly the same, except for some wording on it. This wording may mean that you have two names for the same concept, or it can mean that this is actually a totally different concept, and there are some distinctions missing from your whiteboard, and some misunderstandings inside your team. Secondly, once you have those flows, you can separate the events into comments and actual results of those comments. So you will find out that some of the events are triggers that are not driven by your domain. They are external triggers to your domain that make the domain react in a certain way. And this is important because you do not control those events. You do not control triggers from the user. If user browses the web shop, they will click the button to check out whenever they want to. It's outside of your system's control. But those events, the red ones or the orange ones or whatever color of the card you are using, they are things that are result of this action. So they are things that are reaction done by your system. This is actually what you write down, and you will find that those orange cards are part of your domain. They are your responsibility or other parts of the system's responsibility, and those are your main interest. Of course, blue are also important, but it's just that those are what you have to write down in your code. So you will find that those cards may have different triggers. They may be triggered by users. They may be triggered by external systems. They may be periodically triggered. You can also attach personas to those events. So specific events are only triggered by specific people. There are multiple things that you can do with it. And once you have those, you can actually start dividing into bounded context. And I will argue that this is one of the biggest advantages of event storming when it comes to microservice architectures, but also when you are starting with, for instance, modular monolith, you can also use this tool to separate different modules. What I mean by bounded context is exactly the same meaning as it is in DDD, if you're familiar with it. It's basically a portion of the business, a portion of your domain that is using same language and is actually concentrated about same contents. And you will see that naturally in event storming, you will find that those sections that are separate on the whiteboard are usually best candidates for a separate bounded context. There are some caveats to that. You can find that there is a big there's a big context here. Maybe you can split it into two if you wish. You should experiment. You should question things. However, what I've found in various event stormings that I've participated in is that those sections are just natural candidates. Of course, it doesn't mean that every single one of those should be a separate microservice. It doesn't mean that you have to use those bounded contexts. You can join those two together, but it's just a great way to separate those and find separate areas of concern within your domain. We can get into details later down the road, but it's a really broad topic to talk about, and I don't have time for that. Sorry for that. Lastly, you can go even further. There are various different benefits you can gain from event storming and various different things you can describe using it. You can find aggregates, you can find policies. Policies in event storming are actually things that happen outside of your domain. So something, you did something, you displayed products on the web shop, and then something happens, and once something happened, you see that customer selected some goods. Possibly this policy is something you can automate. In this particular case, not really, but in some cases you can find those policies are candidate for automation. In others, they will nicely explain what happens between this occurrence and this occurrence, so that you are better understanding what's driving the customer, what's driving the system that is doing things between those two steps. You can have read models. You can assign personas, as I mentioned before. You can find where external systems go into play. So there are multiple things, and again, sorry for that, but not really. We do not really have time for that. So what can we gain? I would argue that firstly, and one of the biggest benefits, is knowledge sharing. If there is one thing I got as a feedback from every single session, is that people learned a lot during this session, because the knowledge naturally diffuses between the people that are participating in this. There are talks happening all over the place. People are asking, okay, I see those events, but what do they do? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Maybe we should do something differently. And suddenly people that have just joined the team are just learning everything that happens. Even people who think that they understand the domain already, they started learning something new. I found sometimes domain experts that came to the event storming and came out learning few things that they didn't know before that. It's a great basis for documentation. You can actually document the event storming, put it on a web page, put on some docs that you're using to explain your system, and it's just a high-level view of what your domain does, and it's in a very approachable format. Lastly, you can actually use this as a starting point for future discoveries. So once you have the model of your system, you can put it on a table when new feature comes and find out, okay, where does it fit? Where the new requirements should be in this model we just created. Secondly, you can use the event storming results as a tool for taking high-level picture on your solution and looking how it applies to what you are actually modeling. So you have the domain, your model, your business, the problem you're trying to solve. As an event storming result, on the side you can have your existing solution. How does it map one to another? Maybe we can take out some things and change the underlying model so that it better reflects what we are trying to accomplish. Sometimes you can find that you can use bounded context, well, sometimes, mostly, you can use bounded context as a great natural line for responsibility segregation. Separate services, microservices, you are thinking about it, separate modules, or separate teams. I will get into how we used it in Ocado, but you can find that if you need to introduce a new team inside your organization, separating the teams using bounded contexts limits the amount of coupling between those two teams, limits the amount of interaction between them. Lastly, it's a great tool to find underlying smells in the solution. If you find that people are really arguing about the order of specific events or what they mean, what they are about, it is a great tool to find, okay, maybe we should actually concentrate this and figure it out. Maybe this is not really how it works. Maybe how we do it doesn't represent the business good enough. Lastly, it's a tool for monitoring and alerting. You can take the outcome of the event storming and look at it from the perspective of, this is how our business flow looks like. Maybe we should take part of it, visualize it on a dashboard, visualize it in some tool, and see that our business process reached a specific point. Or we can see that, yes, this is how our user journey goes, and for instance, our current users stop at this level. If there is a support issue, you can find, okay, what is the problem? Where did we stop in the business process? Naturally, also you can design a business alerting, so you can, instead of just monitoring and alerting upon the technical aspects, you can also monitor and alert on business aspects. You can find that, okay, we have this element in our workflow, but we never reached this element of our workflow. So customers can check out, but they never reach the point in which the goods are delivered to them. Something broke in our system, even if the technical layer underneath feels like everything is okay. Health checks are passing, events are sent, but for some reason the user never received their goods. This is a fundamental flaw in our design. So how did we use it in Ocado? Basically, we gained all of the benefits I mentioned before. The event storming was used to kickstart the domains. We gathered in a room and took the domain expert, person who knew what we are going to write, and then started sharing the knowledge, starting to model the solution on the whiteboard using event storming, and then narrow down the solution to only what we needed for the MVP. We found out that, okay, we are having those 5 personas in our system, but we are only going to use first three for the next half a year, and next 2 are going to come in half a year. But for now, we only need to concentrate on those 3. So all the cars that require those other personas could be put on a back burner. We know that we're going to need them. We know where they are going to go, but we know that to concentrate on those. It brought all the team members up to speed. Suddenly, every single person, the new joiners, people who were just starting up, knew what they were doing. And this also happened in the teams that have existing project. We just had a checkpoint, and suddenly people who just joined a month ago, people who joined several months ago, learned things that were just in the heads of those few people who were there for several years, and they just knew everything from bottom up. And yeah, they felt that they know what's actually happening in the domain they were working on. We also were reworking existing domains. We had a place at which our team grew into a size of 12 people, and we started gaining, slowing down by introducing more people into our domain, while we were still getting more and more work on our plate. We decided that we need to split, but in order to split, we have to find separate areas that we could actually split into. And event storming allowed us to actually cut the domain in half so well that we currently speak with each other only when there is a feature that involves both of those domains. It's not high coupling, it's just one team does their own thing, the other things does their own thing, and we no longer have to cooperate as a single team. Those are 2 separate areas. Lastly, we were using this as a split to split big projects. So there were like 5 to 6 people, 6 teams working on a single area, and something was not working correctly. There was a lot of coupling between the services. So if you find yourself in such a position, usually what happens is that a single bounded context is cut in half between 2 separate services. And noticing that and moving responsibilities a little bit can allow you to remove those complexities, remove this high coupling, and allow teams to progress steadily in their own pace. We remove the coupling on the level of prioritization of tasks. We no longer have to deploy one service just as another have deployed, because features are just tightly coupled. It's just a great way to find those smells in the architecture and reorganize around those new functionalities. So if I were to tell you one thing that to take out of all this, even if you do not want to use event storming, is that you may find yourself in a place where your architecture doesn't really reflect what you're doing. It slows you down. It's best to stop, take a step back, take a high-level view of your system, and wonder whether your actual model represents the domain you're having. Because it's best to have a domain driving the model you have underneath, rather than having a model impact how you're doing your business. So thank you, and I'm up for questions.